Hmm?
What?
Laughing at all the technical stuff going on?
I
Yeah.
said that I was going to record my women's circle talk today so I could play it for you and say, see, Gareth, this is how you give a talk.
So I'm going to call Gareth up now.
All right. You realize you're all being recorded at this point because the recording's going. There we go. Benjamin, could you flip all the light switches over there, please? Yep, those two, and then the other one. That's perfect. Thank you. Hello again, Beth. You're hiding back there. If you want to scoot across a little bit, yeah. So today I'm going to talk about freedom from fear. Freedom from fear. Going to begin with a story. I had a car accident the other day. So it was on East College. I was pulling out of a side street. There's 2 lanes of traffic going each way. It was close to rush hour, not quite. Pulling across 2 lanes of traffic to turn left. I sideswiped somebody. I was looking to make sure the lanes were clear, and actually they weren't. I just went into the side of something that was going along. It was a Wednesday, late afternoon. So we all pulled over. Nobody was hurt, but initially the flow, just checking everybody's okay, checking, getting cars out of the road. So there's no time for much thinking. There's no space for much thinking in there. And then called the police and did all that stuff, right? But then things are starting to settle down, and the officer comes over and gives me my ticket first. And he said, he gave it to the other lady first. And they chatted for a little bit. And then he went back to his vehicle and he came back and gave me mine. And he said, she's issued a subpoena, so you'll have a court date. And here's the court date. Oh my goodness, a subpoena? What on earth is that all about? And then I looked at the ticket and I got in the car while I was thinking about what on earth is a subpoena all about? And then I thought that date, and I looked at the date for the court hearing. It's March the 16th, which is the first full day of the meditation retreat that I am leading up in Tennessee. Oh my goodness. How am I going to deal with this? So of course, there's just fear is starting to surge up in the middle of all of this. Fear of a citation. I could be going to jail here. What's this all about? And what am I going to do about the retreat? And then there's Beth, who's hiding back there for good cause because she doesn't want to see my face. She didn't know I was going to do this. What's Beth going to think? Beth, for those of you who don't know, is my wife. What's Beth going to say and think about all of this? So it's just this overwhelming sort of rising up of fear. And Wednesday is reading group. What am I going to do about reading group? Oh my God. So of course I called Charlie, and Charlie said, sure, I'll cover it. Are you okay? Yeah, good. Yeah, sure, I'll cover it. And then, of course, I called Beth and said, I'm going to be late. Yeah. So what is this fear thing? Really? What is this fear thing? Well, at a primitive animal level, it's kind of like the car thing, right? I mean, you're on a road, somebody's going really fast, and bang, there's just what is happening. There's a physiological lion in the brush. I hear the noise of a bear. It might kill me. I mean, there's that instant, in the moment physiological thing. But our fear today has been co-opted, and this fear is really, it's more about me not getting things I want. Like, I want to get home nice and quietly. I want the car to work. I want this to have not happened. It's about the fear of things I don't want to happen coming up. And there's a real panic here of, panic is too strong a word, but jail, prison, what's that all about? What's the citation? What's the subpoena? And then you extend that, it's fear of the things I've got, like my freedom to go home being taken away from me. And freedom, the things that I've got that I don't want sticking, me not being able to get rid of them. So fear is this really complicated thing that sits on top of that primitive physiological thing. And if you think about it in Buddhist terms, those 4 things I've just described Those are actually the description of suffering. So fear is actually, it's you're creating a layer of suffering on top of suffering. It's creating suffering. That suffering might happen. Just bizarre, but that's what it is. Anyway, so there are three gifts in Buddhism. Buddhism offers three gifts. There's lots of different ways of framing this, but the way I like is there's three gifts. The first is the gift of stuff. So the four monastic requisites are food, shelter, clothing, and medicine. So somebody doesn't have shelter, you give them shelter. Somebody doesn't have food, you give them food, and so on. So the gifts of stuff, because unless you're in that stable place where you've got the requisites, you can't do much of anything. The second gift is the gift of the dharma, which is fundamentally the path to freedom, the gift of knowing that, being able to follow that. So the gift of the dharma. The third gift is the gift of freedom. Right, that's the third gift. So we'll circle back as we get towards the end of this to freedom from fear. That's the third gift. So on with the story. So I got home, I settled in, Beth was off doing her thing, and so we didn't see each other too much later that evening. I was back in plenty of time for the reading group, and that's just what I do, right? So I got into flow. 7:55 or whatever, I turned on Zoom, I sat there, Charlie and I and whoever else chatted for a few minutes, and then we sat for 30 minutes, and then we had the reading group, and this car thing just didn't come up, because I was just doing what I do. The accident, the fear wasn't there during that period of time. But then, of course, later it was. And then I sat down at my desk and I sent out a couple of emails. The planning brain starts to kick in, right? So, goodness, citation. I need a lawyer. Who do I know? So I sent emails to a couple of lawyers to find somebody who would be the right person to help. And I started planning, now I need to deal with the insurance and this and that. Anyway, so it all settled down. I'd got some planning brain going on, but I'm very good at going to sleep. I could lie down right here now and be asleep in 5 minutes if I wanted. I'm very good at going to sleep. So I went to sleep and I woke up as I usually do first thing in the morning for my morning practice, which is I get up and I brush my teeth and I go and sit. And the planning brain, when I'm wandering around brushing my teeth, is just going crazy. And of course, it's stirring up all this fear. So the responses I got from the lawyers weren't really encouraging. They didn't feel like the right people. How am I going to get the right lawyer? And if I don't get the right lawyer, and how much of my time is this going to take? And it's just spiraling. So I sat. And something really obvious and yet miraculous happened. And it's like Shunryu Suzuki said, enlightenment was the greatest disappointment, was his greatest disappointment, because it's so ordinary. So what I'm about to tell you is incredibly ordinary, and yet it's miraculous. It's just as miraculous as us all being in this space talking together. I mean, the whole thing is a miracle, but it's very ordinary. So I sat, and all this stuff was bubbling up, but I just didn't offer any resistance to it. So it had nowhere to stick. It had nowhere to land. So the story, and this is all spinning up as stories. By engaging with the thoughts, we're encouraging these stories to spin up and become more complicated, and more threads come in, and we can lose track completely. But by not giving it anywhere to stick, which is what, sitting, we do two things as far as I'm concerned. We stop and we pay attention. This is practice for stopping, and it creates the space to pay attention and see things more clearly. So stopping had nowhere to stick. Sometime in this process, I realized I was just in space, or I was space. That was just it. Like, oh, cool. So there I was in space for a while. And then I got up and I went and sat down on the couch, read a little bit and chatted with Beth, as that's what our morning routine is. And because that's where I was, the conversation with Beth was actually a really lovely conversation, because she was scared and she was worried. And she's rightly scared about my driving because it's not very good. I'm getting better, I promise. I'm working on it. It's still not very good. But it created space where we could have actually a very lovely conversation and really connect. And then I told Beth about this citation and I told her the lawyers, and she knows the lawyer particularly that I'd reached out to. And then she just, so this is just, you create openness and stuff, the right things happen. Flow happens. And Beth remembered how about 4 years ago, maybe 5 years ago, my son had a DUI, and I had found a lawyer to help him with the DUI. And it's like, he's a small court lawyer. He goes to all the little municipal courthouses in, Decatur and Avondale Estates and all the small little DeKalb County courthouses. And so I called him up and he said, yep, my wife does that kind of stuff. And I'd forgotten, and I knew his wife did. So, that just happened. So I chatted with his wife, and she laughed. She said, I have no idea what that police officer was talking about with the citation. You're not going to jail. And you know what? I'll handle that court date for you. You go deal with the retreat, and I'll just go to court for you. It's like, okay, they're done. But it's still there, right? It's still there in the back of the mind. But it's an old story, and it's not got a place to land. If I gave it a place to land, I could still be spinning up these stories of what's going to happen on March the 16th, and maybe it's not going to be closed on that date, and so on and so forth. I mean, there's a rental car out there right now. When am I going to get my real car back? How much money am I going to be sinking on a rental car? So back to freedom from fear. This, fear again, it's this, I want my car back. It's not getting what I want. It's not getting rid of the things that I've got that I don't want to have, that I want to get rid of. I was going to play all these mind games, all these 4, but you get the point. It's the 4 different things, the things I want that I can't get, the things that I've got that I like that I'm afraid of losing, and the things I don't like, and all the rest of it. What that's really about, if you peel that back another layer, the fear is like creating suffering on top of suffering here, but if you peel that back another layer, all those are about is about identifying with the things I want. I like my life. I like my life not living in a jail cell. And that's how I choose to identify, is not living in a jail cell. And if I'm willing to let that go, which I am for reasons I'll get to in a minute, then it can't stick. The suffering and the fear goes away. It's a matter of recognizing whether I'm in a jail cell or not in a jail cell does not define me. Whether I've got the car I bought 4 years ago parked outside or not doesn't define me. I can choose to let it do so, but I can choose to not let it do so. And by not letting it do so, that layer of suffering gets released, and fear doesn't have a place to land. It's just thoughts come, thoughts go. We just chanted in the Heart Sutra, free from hindrance, there is no fear. That's what it's about. No hindrance, nothing sticking, thoughts just flowing. There's no fear. And that then goes on to far beyond all inverted views, one realizes nirvana. We think of our practice as being about releasing ourselves from ignorance. It is releasing ourselves from ignorance, but we think about ignorance as being not knowing. It's actually not quite right. Ignorance is wrong knowing. We think we know, but we don't. We've got a view, but it's just a wrong view. So that's the inverted view. And that point I made about not letting the things I like identify me, not rejecting the things I don't like identify or define me. None of you would be here now if you didn't fundamentally, deep down somewhere, or really, deeply, it's somewhere in you, there is this knowledge. Because the path we are here practicing is fundamentally one of letting go of this sticky self, the self that's a complete illusion. This isn't to say, too many negatives, there is still a Gareth sitting here. It doesn't say that there's no Gareth. What it does say, though, is this Gareth isn't what I think it is. It's about seeing more clearly what this Gareth is. It's just not what I think it is. And this Gareth is truly doing his best. So it was a stupid accident. I did something really stupid, but I wasn't drunk. I wasn't scandalously reckless. I wasn't in a bad emotional state. I wasn't cross with somebody. I hadn't just committed a crime. I mean, I'm doing my best to live a good life, which is living the precepts. And if we're aligned with that, that really reduces the opportunity for fear and other negative emotions to land. Because that edge that brings in shame or guilt or whatever it is that allows it to really stick, it isn't there in the same way. I'm not pretending people don't have shame and guilt, right? But by living an aligned life, it reduces the places where this can stick. It makes it easier. And the other piece of this, Dr. King said somewhere along the way, if I had this written down, but I forgot to bring a piece of paper with me, so I can't. But the words roughly are: if you haven't found something worth dying for, you haven't found a life worth living yet. So we can be living these sloppy lives where we're caught up in the corporate world and worried about paychecks and worried about what our boss says and caught up in just the mess. But we know that's not really important. We know that's not worth dying for, really. But I am living a life that, for me, in these socks, because I don't have shoes on right now, in these socks, my life is worth dying for. I am living a great life. Beth and I have a wonderful home life together. I've got kids who are growing up really well in the world, and that's a space that brings joy. And this practice we have here together, the opportunity to practice with all of you, it's such a blessing and such a gift. This truly is worth dying for. So I wake up every day just so happy to be here, so happy to be able to continue this life. And yes, there are going to be bumps in there where stuff happens, but fundamentally, in that place, fear has a hard time sticking.